welcome to Relish Books. Today is my review of The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. It's kind of funny. This copy that I have, I've now read both the books in it other than the one on the cover. So, anyway, I still have to read that one. But The Age of Innocence was published in 1920, and it's important historically and just to Edith Wharton's work because it won the Pulitzer Prize, and she was the first woman to be awarded that prize. So, a very big deal. As far as the book goes, I've only read 2 Edith Wharton novels at this point, The Age of Innocence and The House of Mirth. Interestingly, I like The House of Mirth a lot better, even though it's more tragic. Neither of them are happy stories. I don't think Edith Wharton really wrote happy stories, ever. It seems that her own life was unhappy in a lot of ways. She had an unhappy marriage and unhappy frictions with society that you can definitely see those themes influencing her work. So she didn't really write happy stories, but the Age of Innocence did not have the level of tragedy and horror that The House of Mirth does, which of course ends very sadly. The Age of Innocence, for how strife-ridden it is, really ends surprisingly, of course I'm trying not to give anything away, but it really ends very surprisingly hopeful. It's not happy really, but it's hopeful, and there's a lot more happiness and good things that came about than you would have expected from everything the book was leading up to. And that was really my favorite thing about it, was how, despite everything, how hopeful the ending was. Other than that, I really didn't care for it. And the main thing that made it so much less enjoyable to me was the main character. You know, in The House of Mirth, I thought Lily Bart was just an incredible character. She was so complex, so interesting, so engaging, and you felt for her every step of the way, even when she was making all the wrong choices. Even when she was always just falling short of what she should do, and you still just want what's best for her the whole time. You want her to find happiness the whole time. She was just a great character. The character of Newland Archer, the protagonist of The Age of Innocence, just didn't work nearly as well for me. I will say, too, that at first, as I was reading it, I was like, well, this is just The House of Mirth with a different cast of characters. Like, it's the same book, slightly different setting, slightly different plot, same thing. As it went on, though, it definitely had a lot more differences, and it really was a different story she was telling, but still a lot of the same themes, and that's fine, because that's what she was, that's the setting of all her writing, really, is social themes, relational themes, things like that. So it's not for lack of originality, that's just the kind of thing she wrote. And as it goes on, yeah, definitely a pretty different story. But so at first I was like, well, this is just a worse version with a more boring protagonist. But it wasn't really that. But at the same time, Newland just didn't get my sympathy the way that Lily did. And not just because he's a male protagonist. I think Edith Wharton can write male protagonists well. I sympathized with Lawrence Selden from The House of Mirth. Part of that book is from his perspective, and I liked him pretty well as a character and sympathized with him and connected with him pretty well. Newland, I think he's supposed to be part of the story, is his kind of double standard and hypocrisy in the society, as he wants to realize this new set of ideas that are being pushed on him. He wants to embrace these new ideas, but because of his upbringing, because of what he's so used to, it's like he wants to believe in these new ideas, but he can't avoid falling back into the routine and pattern of the life that he's always known. Which I think is similar, again, to Lily Bart's story. But he really, to me, was an annoying character. He was just selfish, kind of full of it. And again, he's supposed to be. You're supposed to see these things in him. That's the character that she's drawing for us. But he just wasn't likable. Again, I don't know if he's supposed to be. But it's hard to be invested in a story where the people aren't really likable, because Lily Bart was so flawed, very, very flawed, but I liked her anyway. And I did not feel that with Newland. I had some sympathy for him at some points, for sure, but yeah, he wasn't likable to me. I liked Ellen okay. I think it would have been neat if we had had some of the book from her perspective, like Edith Wharton did in House of Mirth, where she kind of switches between the characters. But she was a pretty good character. She was interesting. She felt original. I was reading in a little bit of the introduction that her character is somewhat based on how Edith Wharton felt coming back from 6 years in Europe to New York society and getting used to all the rules and regulations of society and deportment and all that. So she's interesting. She's a vibrant character. But again, I just don't... The main theme of this book is really the struggle against society, against forms, and, this love attachment that these two characters have. Ellen Olenska is a married woman who has run away from an abusive husband. So she's not free. And Newland, for the first part of the book, is engaged to Ellen's cousin. And then they eventually get married. So they're two married people. They're married to other people, and then they're dealing with this attraction, this very deep, strong attraction that they're feeling for each other. And so that's kind of just the whole premise of the book. And to me, there's a lot of good things about this book. I think it's definitely worth reading because it's thought-provoking, it's interesting as far as the social structures, the way that you can watch the way that the world worked kind of changed throughout the book. And then I thought the ending was really good. But I don't know, I didn't really like the characters, like I said, but also the thing that was hard for me was that the romance didn't really work for me. I didn't understand why, since it's from Newland's perspective, it was hard to see why a woman like Ellen would be in love with him. Maybe just because I didn't like him. And again, it would have been interesting to see things from her perspective, because he was kind to her when she came. And I think his motives were mixed at first, but he was kind to her in a place where, things were difficult for her. And he's probably attractive. He's like sort of a family member, all these things. But it's almost like they have this deep, passionate love for each other based on a few brief encounters, like normal conversations that they have. You feel like this is mostly just an attraction-based romance, not really loving each other for who they are. More on his side than on hers, because she's so different from any other woman that he's known. She throws off a lot of social forms. She kind of does what she feels, and that's very attractive and exciting to him. So I get why he is attracted to her. But he just feels like kind of a stuffy, boring guy. I don't really get her attraction for him. And so it's hard to sympathize with a relationship that you don't get. In a book, the romance usually either has good chemistry or it doesn't, And I really felt like this one didn't have good chemistry for me. So it's like they're so passionate and they're struggling so hard and it's so difficult for them. They have these scenes of being together and they're just tormented by this love. And I just wasn't really as invested as I could have been and involved in feeling with them because I didn't really like the characters and their romance didn't work super well for me. All that being said, that's what I didn't like about the book. And so I didn't love it, but it is a good book, worth reading. Again, for the ending, the end is surprisingly good and just thought-provoking. And here's the biggest reason to read it. Edith Wharton is just a master of language. I talked about that after I read The House of Mirth, but her writing is superb. She's amazing. Like, each sentence, her descriptions, her turns of phrase, she is incredible. One of the best, just as far as she uses language, the full spectrum of language to her advantage. One of the best writers I've read. Not a writer of some of my favorite books. Just because of the subject matter. It's interesting, but it's not what I'm going to be like really wanting to read all the time. But she is an amazingly good writer. Even if you don't read a whole book, just to pick one up and take a look at her writing, at her style, it's definitely worthwhile because it's incredible. I remember reading just the first few lines of The House of Mirth and I was like, I felt like I discovered somebody great that I hadn't known about before, which is always fun. And I feel like all her books are going to be like that. The writing is going to be the same level of excellence, even if the story isn't as good as others. So for that reason, I think all her books are probably worth reading. I'll probably take a little break again before reading The Custom of the Country, but I will get to it eventually. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts on The Age of Innocence. Again, I don't love everything in the story. I don't love the way that she deals with ideas of love and romance and marriage and all these things in some ways, but you don't have to, because I think the main purpose is just to be thought-provoking, to challenge people who only have a limited ideas about things. So even if you don't agree with what she's saying, or even if you do, or like some of it you're like, oh, she's exactly right, and the society was very messed up, which it was in a lot of ways, and then some things that you feel like she may be promoting, you're like, well, I don't agree with that, but definitely worth reading because it makes you think about things, and I feel like it just grows and challenges your mind with the extreme high quality of the writing. So those are my thoughts on Age of Innocence. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.